So let me start with the first book I'm going to use for this course. It's edited by Paul Hawken, which is titled Drawdown, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. It's a rather dry book in terms of just listing all the solutions in various themes and ranking them based on a few criteria that we will look at. And obviously this is going to be a monumental task, and there is no necessarily glamour to it, unlike marching on the streets or putting up signs everywhere and so on. The book is split into chapters or themes, let's say, on energy, food, women and girls, buildings and cities, land use, transport, materials, coming attractions, which are the technologies we are going to look forward to. Coming back to energy, we will go through these various approaches: wind turbines, microgrids, geothermal, solar farms, look at what Alexander von Humboldt's role was. He was the first guy to identify by observations impacts of human-induced climate change, but way back in 1800 and again in 1831. So we'll visit him briefly. There are methane digesters, in-stream hydro, and all the way to energy storage, and which are utility scale and distributed scale, and solar water, so concentrated solar power kind of approach. Food, of course, there is the idea of going away from meat and into plant-rich diet, farmland restoration, silvopasture, regenerative agriculture, conservation, composting, biochar, and so on. And there is this nice book called The Hidden Half of Nature, which is basically focused on highlighting the incredible microbial life forms in the soil and the role the soil itself can play in managing global warming. I have somewhat related themes also in the course that I have posted on my channel called Bending the Curve, which is based on a book by a similar name produced by the University of California system after their president Janet Napolitano made a mandate that they will go carbon neutral by 2025. So I will refer to some of those here as well, but I do have a chapter there. The book has a chapter there on enhancing carbon sinks in soils. So that's food. Women and girls, this sector is deceptively small in number, so women. The solutions here focus on majority of humanity, the 51% who are female. We call them out specifically because climate change is not gender neutral. This was also noted by other people, saying that disasters tend to pick the weak and the vulnerable. So what are the roles that women and girls can play, and in terms of climate solutions, and what special attention needs to be paid even in terms of population growth, where women hold the key in terms of being in charge of reducing population, or at least controlling fertility rates and so on. Buildings and cities, of course, net zero buildings, walkable cities, smart glass, district heating, water distribution, building automation, and so on, which is very critical for developing countries like India, where most of the construction is already going on, but much more is expected to come in the coming decades and multiple decades. So what are the follies of the Western world. They can leapfrog and directly go into net zero buildings and take care of the energy consumption, water consumption, and so on in the newer buildings. And that's a great opportunity as well as a challenge. Land use, of course, humans have a massive fingerprint on land use and land change. So forest protection, coast wetlands, tropical forests, bamboo's role, the man who stopped the desert, so we'll look at that. The hidden life of trees, afforestation. This is another book that has a bit of a controversy associated with it, but we will visit it briefly in any case. Transport, another sector that is considered intractable in terms of reducing emissions. I have a section on this as well in the Bending the Curve course, so one can look that up. But there are many options where emissions can be brought down and should be brought down in terms of drawdown of carbon. Materials, obviously they are going to play a huge role, especially in terms of alternative cement, refrigeration, recycling, not just paper but also plastic, or going to bioplastic, which is biodegradable, of course, and get away from the menace we have created with the miracle substance plastic thus far, and water savings at home. Coming attractions span a range of solutions like repopulating the mammoth steppe, pasture cropping, living buildings, direct air capture, which is going to be very essential in terms of carbon capture and sequestration, if at all we have to meet the goals of 1.5 or 2 degrees centigrade by 2100 with 66% probability. I always keep adding that because it's not just a number, it's the probability with which we are likely to hit it. That's important to remember. Transportations like Hyperloop, microbial farming, building with wood and smart grids, and so on and so forth. Each of these solutions have to kind of be focused on a few things. This is about the man who found that his cattle on the ocean side were actually healthier and so on compared to the other side. So he began gathering seaweed tossed ashore by storms and feeding it to all his animals. It did not take long for Dorgan to recognize he had a business opportunity on his hands if he could get his seaweed feed approved for sale. So there are people actually worrying about reducing methane emission from cattle. And it turns out feeding them seaweed is one of the ways to do that, in addition to having healthier and producing more milk, which are on the seaside rather than on the pastured farther inland. Okay? Cattle have ruminants in general have a very inefficient digestion system where they gobble up everything and then they bring it back up and ruminate. Thermodynamically, this is very inefficient. They produce a lot of methane. So if there is a way to reduce the methane emission, that's great, especially if it also makes them healthier and deliver more milk, right? So the ranking of solutions is necessary in this case because oftentimes this turns out to be a zero-sum game in terms of investing in one or the other. We will not have the luxury of investing in all the solutions, so some sort of prioritizing may be necessary, and the prioritization may be very region specific. What is important for a developing country in the tropics or the global south as they are known is not necessarily the same for a country that's in the extratropics or higher latitudes, where global warming may bring in fact many benefits, like the warming of Siberia may make it very good for agriculture, make Russia the breadbasket of the world, for example. So global warming will create winners and losers. So ranking of solutions is important. There are several ways one can rank solutions: how cost effective they are, how quickly they can be implemented, or how beneficial they are to society, and so on. All are interesting and useful methods with which to interpret the results. For our purpose, we rank solutions based on the total amount of greenhouse gases they can potentially avoid or remove from the atmosphere. The rankings are global, so this is very important to remember. Region specificity is not there. That has to be done by people like you if you are working on a specific region, or countries, and so on. The relative importance of one solution may differ depending on geography, economic conditions, or sector, whether it's energy, food, transportation, buildings, women and girls, and so on and so forth. We also look at gigatons of carbon dioxide reduced. Each solution in Drawdown reduces greenhouse gases by avoiding emissions and/or sequestering carbon dioxide already in the atmosphere. A gigaton is 400,000 Olympic-sized pools. This is about 1 billion metric tons of water, or 1 gigaton. Now multiply by that by 36, because CO2 has mass of 36, yielding 14,400,000 pools. 36 billion tons is the amount of carbon dioxide emitted in 2016. We looked at emissions gap in the first podcast, and you can imagine that we are accumulating carbon since Industrial Revolution, maybe since the beginning of the Holocene, and this has a long residence time. So we have to track not just what's being emitted now, but how we are adding to something that's already building up for a while in the atmosphere, and Drawdown has to look at those solutions. There are total net costs and operational savings associated with each Drawdown. Total cost of each solution in this book is the amount needed to purchase, install, and operate it over 30 years. This is a model that's used. By comparing this to what we typically would spend on food, fuel for cars, heating, cooling of our homes, etc., we determine the net costs or savings from investing in a given solution. Obviously, there will be additional mechanisms needed in terms of helping the developing world implement the solutions, because we are all in this together. We err on the side of being conservative. That means assuming costs associated with the solution that are on the high end, and then keeping them relatively constant from 2020 to 2050. Because technologies are changing rapidly and will vary in different parts of the world, we expect the actual cost to be less and the amount of savings higher. Even taking a conservative approach, however, the solutions tend to offer an overwhelming net saving. So in each solution, we'll look at these numbers just to have a sense. For some solutions, though, the costs and savings are incalculable, as in the cost to save a specific rainforest or support girls' education. A forest has so many ecosystem services: food, fiber, medicine, cultural value, etc. But how do you put a value on it? A tree that's standing may have a lot of value in theory, but if you cut it down and make furniture, then it immediately goes into circulation. So valuing certain common goods is not so easy. Okay, so these are the kind of things we'll worry about in this book, and then I'll come to other books after we finish this. This is going to take a while because this is a long one, and we'll methodically go through the book as it arranges the solutions. I will add as much material from elsewhere, but most of the time I'll just keep it to the book, and you have to make it region specific for yourself, because it's hard for me to do that. I will just try to do it for India specifically because I'm Indian, I'm sitting in India as I record this, and so on.